I feel very fortunate that my, channel has grown so much, especially like, from the summer and like last year. Like my channel has grown a lot. I've met a lot of new people who have come here and I'm just very blessed for that, I think. Though I will say, I do get a lot of recommendations, which I am happy for, but sometimes when I'm doing other series, it's hard to get to them. So, yeah, there are many recommendations I still have not gotten to. So I've decided to help alleviate that I would keep Saturdays open. I won't be doing any long series, hopefully for Saturdays, so I can be quicker about getting through certain people's recommendations, for like one offs or like very short series, I mean like one or two videos, but nothing too long. Just so I can get through it through my recommendations list, because I got a few. Like every time someone recommends something to me in the comments, I have a cool little list that I put it down, and I gotta start chipping away at that list. So this is one of them, and this is about the Napoleon of Iran and the invasion of India. I have no context to this conflict. I have no context of what's happening. I have no context who's the Napoleon of Iran. Basically, I'm going into this as blind as humanly possible with no insightful knowledge to share. So let's get to it, shall we? Let's watch Napoleon of Iran from the wonderful History March.
It is the early morning of the 24th of March, 1738, and from the highest point of the Kandahar citadel, the commander of the city's defenders, Hossein Sultan of the Ghilzai tribe, gazes down on the army that rests like a teeming hornet's nest at the edge of his walls. The forces of Nader Shah, ruler of Persia, have surrounded Kandahar for almost an entire year, building a completely new town, replete with streets, markets, barbers, and coffee houses at its edge. A living notice to Hossein and the city's inhabitants that they have no intention of moving, no matter how determined their resistance. Nadrabad, as the boomtown is known, is now home to a depressingly large multinational force. The Persian ranks numbered 80,000 at the siege's outset, but it seems to Hossein and the Afghans that they have been joined by unending numbers of reinforcements who arrive every morning to the bustling and growing Nadrabad streets. The effect this has on the hungry inhabitants of Kandahar is crushingly predictable.
Like I said, I've mentioned this on and off before, but I think that if I had to be in a war, I would rather just die in a pitched battle than to be stuck in a siege, because siege warfare is awful for the ones usually inside, and then, it just revs up when cannibalism starts. Not that cannibalism has started yet. I mean, who knows? We haven't seen the whole video. But a lot of sieges, eventually there is a desire to resort to cannibalism, and yeah, it's not pretty. And what I like about Nadra Shah, Nader Shah, oh boy, yeah, we're in an, yeah, I'm not gonna say any of these names correctly, but what I like is that the dude has just built, him and the Persians have just built uh their own city essentially. It's not just a camp, it's a city. It has all kinds of things going on. So the dude just built a city just to kind of flex on them. And so far, yeah, he seems to have the numerical superiority. And yeah, just gonna wait them out.
Now reduced to eating horses, but not yet starving, a victory for Nader Shah is an inevitability, but they will make him work for it. Hossein and his people have no intention of surrendering quietly. In truth, Nader has been running a deception on a mass level. Every night after dark, he has large contingents in the rear of his army march out of sight, make camp, and then march once more into Nadrabad with much fanfare the next morning. making it seem from the city walls that his supply of troops is inexhaustible.
I love that. That's so smart. That's just great psychological warfare. You know, just frighten the enemy into thinking, yeah, frighten the enemy into thinking you got an endless supply of manpower. Yeah, I love to see that. Love to see that psychological warfare there, Nader. And yeah, I just really like that.
On this morning, however, Hussein knows that the Persian preparations are at an end, and it is the time for battle.
If you're using Old Spice's whole body deal spray, you need to watch this video. I partnered with Dubman Plus Care and they recently completed.
Looking out at the vast numbers of Tofangchi musketeers in their metal helmets and elite Jazayirchi cavalry with their Shamshir sabers glinting where they hold them at their shoulders, Hussein Sultan tries to mask a sense of dread when he considers the damage that Nader Shah's Persian army will do once they crash inside Kandahar's resilient mud walls. His eyes rove to the place where Nader Shah has placed his Tupchi artillerymen, a developing force that makes use of Zanburak, light cannon mounted on the backs of camels. It is a diabolical sight to the remaining defenders on Kandahar's Borj-e-Dedi, the system of fortifications made up of towers and walls that acts as the town's shield. Since January, Nader Shah's contingents have been more offensive in their approach, their leader wishing to be moving once more, the sedentary nature of the siege going against his instincts as a Turkmen rider who consciously styles himself on Tamerlane. Slowly, tower by tower and wall by wall, Nader's mixed force of Bakhtiari, Kurd and Abdali have fought the Afghans back. Every square inch of ground a matter of conflict. Each night, the defenders work desperately to repair the damage done during the day, to keep the marauders at bay for just a few more hours. Finally, with the warm months on the threshold, the final assault begins, and the Bakhtiari lead the way once more, their combatants wishing to atone for a recent uprising against the Shah's power. All of the elements of the army that Nader Shah has constructed over the decades since he came to prominence combine, rushing from concealed trenches, caves, even strategically placed boulders where they have been camouflaging their convergence from the sentries on the battlements. The streets and buildings of Kandahar become a charnel house. Slaughter and blood.
So yeah, Nader Shah just seems to have this completely... Yeah, the dude's just handling this very well. And yeah, this whole just attacking on all sides, right? Like, very smart.
Shed are everywhere. As reinforcements rush through the streets to fight, they are shot down by Nader's musketeers who have hacked their way onto the elevated walls and towers. Hussein shelters with his family and close retainers in the citadel, but when the remainder of the city has fallen, Nader brings up his artillery to fire point blank at the fortress and blast his way to mastery. Hussein is not slow in asking for terms. Kandahar has fallen, and Nader Shah, a most imposing figure on horseback, for he is taller than almost all other men, rides through it in triumph. It is a great and hard-won victory, but the Persian Empire's campaign is just beginning, for beyond Kandahar lies the road to Delhi, and Nader Shah has every intention of going further than any previous ruler managed.
It is cool to see the Persian Empire, though it's not the... Yeah, it's not the Persian Empire that we think of, pre-Alexander the Great. It's, obviously different, but it's cool to see learn more about the Middle East, because yeah, we've mainly had a huge emphasis on just Europe. Mainly Rome, um, Napoleon. So it's nice to kind of see what's going on in other parts of the world. And yeah, this happened many years before Napoleon started making his scene. So, and all this territory. Look at all this territory, man. Just, yeah, quite the conqueror there, hey.
To surpass the limits even of Cyrus and Alexander 2 millennia earlier. He is going to conquer India itself. In the aftermath of his great conquest of Kandahar, avenging himself on the Afghans who...
Excuse me, I'm drinking water. But, yeah, ambitious, huh? Like, going into India, he mentioned, Alexander never got the chance to. Though Alexander wanted to, his army was like, no, we're not doing that. Cyrus... Yeah, so I could see why, Nader is like, alright, I'll do it, That's pretty ambitious. He wants to obviously make his mark on history, so I do like that. And, I like that he has war camels. I mean, yeah, camels I've heard have been used for war, obviously, but I like he has, like, guns on them. I was thinking the other day of just, like, we need more, like, it would have been kind of cool to see other animals if we could have tamed them, how we would have used them for war. Could you imagine, like, war bears, or, like, war giraffes, or, like, I don't know why, it's just, like, I'm just thinking, like, think of all the possibilities, man, Like, I don't know, I was just having that funny little thought. Like, just war zebras, oh, those would have been a terror. Unfortunately, zebras aren't able to, we can't, like, tame them like we could with the horse. I was watching a really interesting video. Why zebras could not be tamed by men, but the horse could. It's really interesting. But yeah, let's get back. Let's see the ambitious Nader Shah, how he's gonna exactly take India. Granted, India's, obviously fractured, it seems, they're different things, so I guess divide and conquer?
In the previous decade, had wrought devastation through Persia and even toppled a previous Shah. Nader had the citadel and the town itself razed, and the surviving inhabitants sent to live in Naderabad. Allowing himself the chance to savor the fact he had restored the old borders of Persia, he moved with his army only in May, arriving at Ghazni toward the middle of June, and then marching for Kabul. This brought him out of the traditional realms of the Persian Empire and over the border of the Mughal Empire. His ostensible pretext for marching into the territory of the Mughals was to destroy or capture the Afghans who had been afforded shelter there. In truth, most are aware that Nader is ambitious, and the state of the Mughal Empire makes it an easy target for treasure with which to pursue further wars with his western nemesis, the Ottoman Turks. Where at the beginning of the 18th century, the Mughal Empire had controlled the vast swathe of the Indian subcontinent, the intervening 40 years has seen a succession of weak or incompetent rulers, along with internal...
That's just the lifespan of an empire. It'll be big, but it won't be big forever, right? But man, yeah, and that's what I was saying. India's, like, looks fractured, so obviously this is the perfect opportunity to divide and conquer, and taking down a weaker empire past its heyday, easy, and just move on from there with these smaller, areas. Like, it really is just the perfect divide and conquer,
Strife and challenges from usurpers, not to mention the challenge of the Punjabi Sikhs and Hindu Marathas. Large tracts of central India had recently fallen to them, and the Emperor Muhammad Shah seemed powerless and incapable of resisting their seizures. His disadvantageous position was exacerbated by the de facto autonomy of Mughal viceroys and governors. Men like Nizam-ul-Mulk, ruler of the Deccan, Khan Dauran, head of the army, as well as the Hindu bloc within the empire, and finally the governor of Awadh, Saadat Khan, who was known to be sympathetic to the Persian cause, paid only lip service and little more to the throne. There was also the growing European presence in the subcontinent, which had first been established by the Portuguese in the last years of the 15th century, but which now included the Dutch, Danish, Swedish, and most prominently, British and French.
Join large-scale battles with military vehicles. The online action game War Thunder has received a major update.
The influence of these semi-autonomous European corporations dotted around the coast was growing every year, and they continually drifted in and out of conflict with the local and imperial authorities, even recruiting their own native forces and naval contingents. The profits they made both for the local authorities and their backers in Europe meant that their presence was now an immovable reality, and they were observing the outcome of the conflict between the Mughals and Nader Shah with a keen interest. In truth, therefore, when Nader and his huge army rolled down from Kandahar in 1738, supposedly hunting Afghan rebels, the territory actually under the control of Muhammad Shah was just a fraction of the empire over which he was purported to be absolute monarch. This weakness, coupled with Muhammad Shah's own lackadaisical nature, hobbled the Mughal war effort against such a zealous and proficient adversary. When Nasir Khan, the governor of Kabul, had begged him for just 1 year of the half-decade of back pay owed to their troops while they awaited the arrival of Nader Shah, the emperor had fobbed him off with promises that payment in the rainy season would be sufficient. Nader subsequently arrived at Kabul to discover that Nasir had taken most of his men to Peshawar rather than risk a battle with such a potentially compromised force. The majority of the city surrendered to Nader, but a select number of fanatics had fortified themselves in the Kabul citadel, and Nader once more blasted them with his own light artillery, as well as some heavier-grade weapons captured from the Mughals. Kabul was reduced, but Nader treated its inhabitants mercifully after their general lack of resistance, even going so far as to execute any of his own men who mistreated the locals. From Kabul, he dispatched a messenger with a conciliatory note for Muhammad Shah, again avowing that his only interest in entering Mughal territory was to capture Ghilzai tribal members who were fleeing his justice. The diplomatic courier was intercepted, however, and put to death somewhere around Jalalabad. After resting at Charikar, Nader's army moved in September to Gandamak, and from there to Jalalabad. News of the execution of his messenger reached Nader while he was still en route to the city, and he immediately dispatched his elite Jazayirchi to storm ahead and bring retribution onto the governor and the inhabitants. The Jazayirchi arrived like a lightning bolt from a grey metal sky, shrieking down on the startled and dismayed sentries with such fury that they breached the walls and immediately put the entire town to the sack. The code of war broken by the killing of the Persian messenger, the Jazayirchi and then Nader's entire force were set loose to unleash a general slaughter, and any of the female locals fortunate enough to live through the initial carnage were put in chains and taken to the uncertain and foreboding future of slavery. Nader received word that the governor of Jalalabad had fled to the hills, and a detachment of the army was sent to reduce his position. Once there, they found that the Afghans had dug trenches in the hillside, and artillery and hard fighting was required to complete the task. The same practice as had happened in the city followed, with the men being executed and the women taken into captivity. Nader next made camp southwest of the ruined and smoking city, where his son Reza Koli joined him. Reza had been campaigning to the north in Andkui and Balkh, eradicating the rebel elements there, but had exceeded Nader's orders and crossed the Oxus River. This could have resulted in a state of war with the Uzbeks and Khwarezm, but Reza had extricated himself, and Nader wrote assurances to the Khans of the area that he had no designs on their territories. Such insubordination would ordinarily have resulted in execution, but Nader forgave his son and even appointed him Viceroy of Persia in his stead.
Yeah, well, yeah, the potential, right, of what I could have done was certainly there. Luckily, nothing bad happened so far. So, yeah, also to murder your own son, it's like, I mean, there are leaders who would do that, but I don't know. It's still a lot to do, right?
Union with his son over, Nader learned from scouts the following day that the former governor of Kabul, Nasir Khan, had rallied and raised a force of 20,000 Afghans, working independently of Muhammad Shah's government. They were now holding the Khyber Pass, blocking the Persian advance to the south, and determined to break the invader. Characteristically rushing to meet a threat, Nader completed the 80-kilometer journey from Jalalabad to the natural fortress in the following days. By now it was early November, and winter had settled on the land and inside men's bones like a dull weight. Once at the pass, Nader saw that Nasir had indeed created a fearsome strongpoint. No fewer than 20,000 Afghan tribesmen were entrenched at the gateway to India, meaning that even though they would be outnumbered many times over when the main Persian army arrived, the defenders would kill multiples of their own force before Nader could clear the pass. The artillery would be of aid in dislodging the defenders, but the battle would prove to be ruinous for the Persian army, shattering it and likely leaving Nader without a sufficient host to press forward toward the center of the subcontinent. Undeterred, Nader made his camp at Barikab, and once the men present had been provisioned and rested, he immediately set about a massive engineering works in front of the Afghan positions. From the dawn, he was visible to Nasir Khan and the other enemy commanders, astride his horse and with his royal turban flying, exhorting and encouraging his men to dig the earth, clear rock, and widen the road leading up to the Afghan trenches and elevated firing points. The defenders of the pass, the arid hills around it reaching up to 1,000 meters and framed by two streams that had scraped out the acute and restricted bottleneck across which a commander could barely deploy a single company, beheld Nader Shah's legendary work ethic in person. From the early morning until the dusk, the Shah and his army worked in sight of the defenders, making it clear beyond all conceivable doubt that he intended to mount a frontal attack, pulverizing the Afghans with numbers and cannon, and sacrificing tens of thousands of his men in the unquenchable pursuit of victory. Nasir and his tribesmen remained tense while they watched the carts carry away mountains of dirt and stones. By evening, the terrain in front of them was as clear and flat as a racetrack, but mercifully the sun dipped, and logic dictated that there would be no offensive that day. Nasir ordered his companies to stand down, rest in their trenches and foxholes, and sleep if they were able. A guard was posted to watch the Persian lines. On the opposite side, with one last look at the enemy, Nader Shah disappeared into the gloom, and Nasir breathed easily for the first time in hours. He waited some time and then retired, his attendants offering him a second cloak for the growing November freeze. But, unbeknownst to the Afghans in the pass, Nader Shah had rode back in the direction of his own camp. He summoned his lieutenant, Aji Khan Bek, and ordered him to move at once with a 10,000-strong forward cavalry detachment. Nader himself would ride with them. He gave command.
I'm wondering if they're about to try to find a way to go around and catch the enemy unaware. Flank, if you would.
And of the main army to his other son, Mortaza Mirza. He was to keep it at Barakab until further notice. Meanwhile, units under the Nasrullah Qoli, numbering about 12,000, would remain in sight of the pass. The Shah advanced south, riding toward a break in the mountains a guide has informed him lay at Satsobi. Soon, Nader and his 10,000 riders are shrouded in the dark of a winter night. They ride over open, roadless country, the ground strewn with rocks and boulders where it is not a steep slope. The temperature plummets past freezing, bitter winds lacerating their uncovered eyes, but there is no let-up in the pace from the Persians. Moving without maps, the Jazayirchi and their warrior monarch ascend peaks and then guardedly walk their mounts down the other side, navigating their way through some of the most inhospitable terrain on Earth at the worst time of year and in the worst conditions. Yet they continue the relentless move southeast, the tribes who hold the area prudently staying back, aided in a large part by significant bribes sent ahead by Nader Shah.
Yeah, kind of giving off like Hannibal vibes, going through like really bad conditions, but all in the pursuit of glory. And this works. Yeah, just a complete victory, right?
Even still, the threat of ambush is ever present, and no man can know for sure what kind of threat, man or beast, is lying next to them in the dark.
All aboard! Meet Modern Warships, a free online action game where you can control a huge...
Nader Shah and his 10,000 men propelled through the Satobi Pass and into the Bazar Valley that night in November 1738. Crossing craggy, broken spurs, hundreds of feet above certain death, in numbing and glacial cold. After a final, harrowing, claustrophobic gorge, light began to grow to the east, and the hollow-eyed cavalry and their freezing horses emerged onto the Peshawar road.
Amazing. And that's what I'm telling you guys. The flank is the oldest trick in the book, but still effective, Still super effective. I almost want to do like a game. Like, I don't drink alcohol, but if I did, I would like take a shot every time. Every time I saw a flank in one of these videos, I probably would have already died, actually. I would have died of alcohol poisoning. You kidding me? Oh, man. But still, that's admirable. The man... He's willing to do what it takes to win. And risk like that are risky, obviously, but the payoff is just too good. And look, perfect. Just completely outplayed. Amazing.
Nader had the opportunity to make straight for the town, but instead he turned his men directly at the enemy who were still waiting for the frontal attack they had seen Nader preparing on the other side of the pass just the evening before. When they appeared at the Afghan rear while the morning was still breaking, Nader and his men must have seemed like nightmarish phantoms emerging from the gloom. With no artillery support, the Persians relied on musket, bow, lance, and saber, careering into the dismayed and unprepared Afghans and cutting a swathe through their lines until Nasir and his chiefs managed to organize any kind of resistance. While this was happening on the southern side of the pass, Nader's forces under Nasrullah Qoli arrived from the north and engaged the Afghans still there, limiting Nasir's ability to send reinforcements to the unprotected southern section. The outcome...
completely trapped them, man. Like, man, just a very bold and great move.
An inevitability, the Afghans put up a valorous resistance, the fighting for a time being keen and ferocious, the muskets on Nasir's side cutting down cavalrymen before their positions were overwhelmed by saber-wielding troopers. The struggle then quickly devolved into a melee where the same muskets were turned to clubs. Eventually, after much bloodshed to his host, Nasir called for a truce, and he and his remaining forces were taken prisoner. As a result of the victory in the Khyber Pass, Peshawar surrendered to the Shah without a fight in the aftermath, and the road to India was now open. If he could hold his momentum, Nader would become the most powerful ruler of Persia in centuries. But while the Mughal Empire was deeply divided and rent with enemies within and without, it remained a formidable force, and Nader's battles for the wealth of the subcontinent were not yet over. His operation at the Khyber, though, had lifted him from the status of great warrior leader to perhaps the world's greatest living general, and one who would go on to live in the ages. Covering 80 kilometers in 18 hours in complete darkness over impassable terrain without...
Exactly, that was... it's still like the without the... wait.
Navigation equipment.
Yeah, without the equipment. The fact that he pulled that off was actually really amazing. Like, no joke. Like, that was really impressive.
Even today, almost 3 centuries later, is a feat that could only be bettered by making use of helicopters. Russian observers were astounded, and they still remembered the accomplishment a century later, while making their own plans in the event of a war with British India. Nader Shah, the shepherd boy who became the King of Kings, had created a military engine built on tenacity, faith, strength, and vision. And as the year 1738 came to a close, there were men in throne rooms the length of Asia who speculated what force of nature or the Almighty would be required to bring this war machine to a halt. If you stayed around this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to
Okay, so footnote 1, in modern times, some portray Nader Shah as a national hero, while others the wrath of God in an age devoid of great rulers. Nader captured the imagination of both Europe and Asia. He undeniably registered Persia/Iran, and ended foreign occupation, yet he was also known for cruelty and imperialism. Nader's invasion and subsequent sacking of the Mughal Empire was particularly devastating. Immense wealth was plundered from Delhi, including the famed Peacock Throne. Nevertheless, he is known as the Napoleon of Iran, and he was one of the most capable rulers of his time. For millennia, the Khyber Pass was an important link between Southeast Asia, India, and China, with the Middle East, Europe, and Africa in the West. It was a bottleneck for caravans, armies, nomad migrations. To this day, it is considered one of the most important geostrategic positions of the world. So yeah, this was a really cool video. I really liked that. I think the part that impressed me the most was his ability to go through that pass and like emerge the other side. Like I said, that is a very impressive feat, and I think that's the one that caught my attention the most. Though obviously the man is bold, ambitious, you know, basically the very image of a conqueror as we're used to on this channel. And you know, taking risk and being lucky is kind of a part of being a great conqueror. Even the greatest had a lot of luck on their side, and so that was a very interesting video. I really like that one, and yeah, I don't really have much else to add other than I'll see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone.